pandemic. I was pretty happy when we finally moved in, since my parents gave the entire basement to me because it wasn't like we were going to store anything anyway. We moved from a 70-meter squared flat to an almost 200-meter square house with 3 floors and all that. I was really impressed because we were pretty poor in Germany, and up to this point, I had to share a room with my 13-year-old brother for as long as I can remember. As you can guess, I had no way to fill up all that space with my stuff. I basically just set my PC and my desk in the corner of one room, with my bed and wardrobe in the other end of the room. This was the room that was furthest from the emergency exit, as my family called it. Basically, just an old wood shed embedded into the ground, which the previous owner made accessible from inside the house by removing a wall and putting new steel bars between the basement and the shed. It freaked me out the moment I first saw it. There were all sorts of bugs and spiders crawling in there, and it smelled like no one had cleaned in there since the house was built. A really, really heavy dusty smell comes up every time you move a piece of wood even by an inch. On the other side of the shed door is our yard, directly accessed by a small fence. Usually, because of my very impulsive dogs, no one tries to go near that fence as he will storm to the window and bark at the slightest gush, like a bird shitting on my car or some random pedestrian walking by like 5 meters away. I have no idea how he hears these things. I usually just run with my dog to the window just to discover what it was after. For the last few weeks, however, I have been woken up several times by a weird squeaky noise at night. Up until earlier today, I had no idea where this noise was coming from. Then my dad opened the emergency exit door from the outside, and I immediately felt uncomfortable. This was the noise I heard all the time. When I confronted my mother about it, as she could be the only one going through that door, she said she would never go through that shed. She couldn't even climb in or out without breaking her legs, as she put it. I went with that answer, as I would probably hear the door connecting our basement with the rest of the house too, if she was to go in or out through that door. I confronted my girlfriend, who stayed at my place for the weekend. I remember that I heard the noise clearly, but at that point, I just assumed that one of my family members was sneaking out or something, so I kept quiet. She said she did not hear anything. I told myself that I'd probably just imagined or dreamed it, like those dreams that repeat every now and then. At this point, I'm feeling very uncomfortable and paranoid about the situation. When evening came around today, I showered and got ready for bed, but I wasn't really that tired, so I stayed on my phone for a few hours. I was up till 1 a.m. just watching TikTok and doing Duolingo. Then I heard the noise again. Somehow my dog didn't hear it. My family has never heard it. My girlfriend has never heard it. I'm laying in my bed, not having any idea what to do. But I decide not to be so scared. So I open up the WhatsApp chat with my girlfriend and start recording with flash on and the shitty WhatsApp video quality, because in a panic, I would be more likely to be able to send it directly to her if I'd actually had to confront someone there. I ended up with a 3-minute video of me slowly scanning every inch of my basement with the camera first. I thought they would 100% be able to spot me with the camera with flash on, and so I armed myself with a makeshift weapon, a chain and an old lock. Fast forward 2 incredibly long minutes later, I look like an incredibly paranoid idiot and end up sending the video to my girlfriend by accident, and I can't remove it because she's really insecure and some deleted messages from the middle of the night would certainly bring up more problems than just sending it. I don't know where else to turn to, as no one would believe me. I don't think it's a mental problem, as I've been fairly mentally stable my whole life, with no other mentally ill family background. I just don't know where to turn to with this, as it's really messing with me right now. I'm definitely gonna call the day off work tomorrow and look into this further. I can't set up a camera, as my shitty Huawei's camera only works when unlocked, and the screen would definitely be visible in case of an actual intruder. I don't know how they would react in such a situation, but I'm sure I'm not going to find out. I've heard stories about people living in other people's houses without them knowing, and I'm pretty sure that's what I'm dealing with. But if I told this to anyone, they would tell me I'm just imagining stuff, or that I'm going crazy. I hope Reddit can help me somehow. In the summer of 2019, my partner and I decided to take a road trip to Vancouver, Canada, and then stay at Golden Ears Provincial Park. We liked camping, had spring break, and wanted to do something different and make the most out of our vacation. My partner had never been out of the US, and it seemed like a crazy new experience. It was a 6-day trip with Airbnbs in each state, and the grand finale was a reserved campsite at Golden Ears, and it was close to the water, Alouette Lake. We packed terribly, had a giant tent, bought a bunch of fruit and veggies to eat healthily, stored them in a cooler that was too small, and brought a cutting board and knife to break up the snacks while driving. We started in California. We switched to driving our bright red Ford Fiesta. We drove through Oregon and Washington and made it to Vancouver. We spent a day or two in each state, drank a little too much, and stayed out late. Canada was the best part, and Alouette Lake felt like walking in a painting. We walked barefoot on the rocks with our toes in the freezing cold lake. We hiked around, saw a beautiful waterfall where we saw a couple taking pictures of each other for an hour, and we started modeling the same poses from far away. Everything was perfect, and the campsite was empty except for the other couple. We went to bed early that night. It was quiet, and I woke up to crackling outside the tent. My partner was still asleep and snoring. I didn't think much of it because it was pitch black and probably an animal. The crackling continued closer to the tent. I sat up and grabbed my phone. The brightness came on and I turned it off, almost blinding myself with the light. In those 2 seconds, I could make out a person right outside of our tent. I froze and sat up. They weren't moving, and they were close enough to unzip the tent. I started poking my partner because I had no idea what to do. They woke up, and I said there's someone outside the tent. Then I hear footsteps, quiet footsteps walking out of our campsite. My partner starts loudly saying, "What?" repeatedly in a haze. A car or truck is parked right outside our camping area. No one is near our campsite. It starts up and then drives off. They didn't turn the lights on until they turned the corner and were out of view, so I couldn't make out much, but it looked like a truck. Now I'm shaking, and my partner can't put together what's happening. I want to leave, but Golden Ears locks the gate until 6 or 7 a.m., and the time was 1 a.m., so we have no choice but to be here. I make us move to the Ford Fiesta to sleep in the tightly packed car. She falls asleep immediately and thinks I'm paranoid. Could it have been a park ranger? It seemed too weird of behavior for a park ranger. I sit there wide awake for about 2 hours. The car is locked, and I want to sleep, but can't. I'm in the passenger seat. My partner is in the driver's seat asleep, and it's 3 a.m. I'm sitting half awake. I hear a car slowly driving up the road, lights off as it rounds the corner. It had to be the same truck, and I was scared, but my adrenaline was pumping. It slowly rounds the corner and pulls up directly in front of our campsite, again in the same spot. I feel like I'm gonna throw up. I had no weapon but the kitchen knife we brought for the fruit and vegetables, so I grabbed the knife and tried to make myself look angry, crazy, and big. I sit straight up in the passenger seat holding the knife. I keep it straight up at eye level and stare deadpan out at this truck in the pitch black, just like the father in the American Gothic painting. The truck stops and turns off. A light shines directly into my face coming from inside the truck, and I stare back, terrified, in my bright red Ford Fiesta, holding my large kitchen knife, not blinking. The truck starts up and turns on its lights, and they stay on, blinding me, and the truck pulls out and turns around and goes back where it came from. My heart is pounding, and I wake up my partner and say we need to get the hell out. We pack by just throwing things into our car and sit there awake until 6 a.m. We drive home and don't stop. We keep rehashing and trying to make sense of the situation. We ultimately decide that we both need some sleep. This story happened New Year's Eve 2 years ago. I'm a male and I was in my 30s. My friend John, who is also 30, and our friend Jane, who is 28, were drinking at our other friend's bar. It's a small place and not too popular, so our friend behind the bar was quick to refill our drinks as we finished them. After last call, we decided to go get food for our drunk munchies. There obviously weren't too many options, but we ended up going to a breakfast cafe in the bad part of town. Everything was fine. We paid and started walking out. On the way out the door, there was a shady-looking guy only wearing an open hoodie, no shirt on, and baggy, worn-out jeans. He was leaning in the hallway for the bathroom by the exit and watched us leave. As we're walking to the side of the building where our Lyft driver was picking us up, we noticed the sketchy-looking guy following us about 10 to 15 feet behind us. We picked up our pace, got in the car and locked the door before even greeting the driver. We quickly said our names so he knew we were his riders, and we asked him to pull away because of the bad feeling. As we pulled out of the lot, I turned to watch the sketch ball. I noticed he'd put a mask on, was wearing a single glove on his right hand, and I believe he may have had a firearm or a knife. The creep stood behind a bush, watching us leave. We called the restaurant to report it. Probably should have phoned the police too, but we didn't really know if we were overreacting. This happened probably about 14 years ago when I was 17. I was in a university in California, and I used to go to a local Starbucks by my campus in my free time to study, because it was hard for me to focus at home. I remember this older guy used to come in a lot and just sit alone at a table always facing me with one small coffee, and he would just stare. It made me deeply uncomfortable, but I was too young to think about reporting it because I didn't think there was anything to report. He was just staring, not approaching me or anything. In fact, I thought some of it was in my head. I began to notice that sometimes he would leave around the same time I did. With this Starbucks, the parking was mostly in the ground level of a free parking structure that was around the corner from the shop. It was usually really easy to get a spot right in front so you could actually see your car from the street in the structure. I usually parked there, and I never felt particularly unsafe except when I would realize he was following me out. I began to note what his car looked like and where he would park. It would usually be a little away from me, and I would wait for him to leave before I went anywhere because I didn't want him to follow me. One afternoon, though, I was heading to my car and I noticed that he parked right next to me. The passenger side of the car was by my driver's side, and it was very close. I didn't see him, but I remember just having the most awful feeling in the pit of my stomach when I realized he'd parked so close. I rushed to get into my car, and it was at the moment that I shut the door that I realized he was following me and approaching the driver's side of my vehicle. He'd gotten as far as the door when I quickly locked it, and thankfully I did it fast enough because he tried to open my door a second later. I immediately backed out of the spot and floored it out of the structure. I got caught at a red light outside the structure though, which gave the guy enough time to catch up to me in his car. I honestly don't know why I didn't call the cops at this moment. I remember trying to rationalize what was going on in my head and thinking maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing, even though the man had literally just tried to open my car door. I know it's stupid, but I was 17. If it were me now at 31, you bet I would have driven straight to the nearest police station. Thankfully though, I was aware enough that I needed to lose him before I went home. so I turned into a series of residential streets to see if he would follow, and he did. I just sped up and made a bunch of random turns until I was sure I lost him. Then I drove home, and never went back to that Starbucks again. I don't want to think about what would have happened had I not been quick enough to lock my door or lose him. I entered the student parking lot at my college campus. As I got out of my car, I see a man standing a few cars away. I start walking, and the man says, "Hey, remember me?" I said, "No, I don't." With a big smile, he replied, "I remember you from high school. We were in Miss Smith's class. I never had a Miss Smith in high school, and I'm damn sure I would have remembered this guy if he was in my class, since me and my classmates had been together for the 4 years in high school." So I said, "No, sorry, I have to go." Then he asked what high school I went to. I told him, and he swore he knew me. Again I said, "No, sorry, I don't recognize you." He then asked me for a ride to his class, and that it started at 9:15. My college classes started on the hour. All my inner warning lights are going off. I'm getting weirded out and say, "I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go to class." As I walk away, he says out loud, "I guess I can't pull the wool over your eyes." A week later, the college campus newsletter said a man robbed a student at knife point. The student had given him a ride, and the student had been asked the same questions by the man. This happened to me in my early 20s, and as a direct result of this experience, I have now developed a strong fear and mistrust of the opposite sex. For that reason, I will be keeping my identity anonymous. It happened one night when I was on my way home from work. I got off the train at my usual station, and I was walking down the street in the direction of home. I had my earbuds in, and I was listening to music. It was just an ordinary night. As I was walking, I sensed a presence behind me, so naturally I glanced back. I guessed that I might have been in someone's way or something. I looked back to see a man on a bicycle. He was wearing a surgical mask, so I couldn't see his face clearly. He looked young, and when I heard his voice, I guessed that he was about the same age as me. He said something along the lines of, "Hey, when I saw you, I knew that I just had to stop and talk to you. You are so my type. Are you free right now?" Realizing that this guy was just trying to hit on me, I pretended that I couldn't hear anything over my music. I just kept hoping he would leave me alone. "Hey, can you hear me? Or are you busy? Why is that? Why don't you just give me your contact information? I won't even contact you." "Then why the hell do you want my number?" I wondered. I realized that this creep wasn't going to get the hint, so I decided to go a little stronger. I made a big gesture of turning my head away from him, and I upped my pace so he wasn't as close. He did freak out, but it only took me about another 3 or 4 minutes to get home, so I just focused on what I wanted to do when I got in. I told myself soon I would be sitting on my sofa watching a movie behind a locked door. I didn't look back. I just kept walking. To get to my place, I have to go along some busier streets and some quieter ones. When I turned off to head down the quieter street, I noticed something. Suddenly, from behind me, I heard some kind of clanking sound. It sounded like metal rubbing against metal. I turned around to see what was coming, and I saw amidst the darkness of the night, I saw a guy wearing a surgical mask coming right at me on his bicycle. I thought that our brief and horrible exchange was over, but it seemed pretty clear to me that he had been following me. My first thought was a really strange one. Even if I ran home as fast as I could, he would still catch me. It was true. He had a bike, and with that thought came a kind of internal avalanche of fear. I was confused and scared, and I wanted nothing more than to be off of those dark streets. I remembered that there was a coin laundry nearby that I sometimes used. I figured I could get there and into the light in about 10 seconds. There might be people in there too. If I was lucky enough to find someone in the laundromat, then that guy would probably go away. If not, I could lock the door from the inside if I had to, and then I could call the police. I turned and started sprinting. The metal clanking sound was getting louder, which I guess now was probably the pedals of his worn-out bike. I knew without turning around that that meant that he must be pedaling faster in pursuit. I threw open the door to the laundromat and got in without the creep catching up to me. Of course, no one was in there. There were no other customers. That was just the kind of luck I was having that night. I locked the door. I knew how to lock the door because I'd seen the owner do it. I locked the door and I headed right to the back of the room. I was shaking with fear and breathing heavily. I grabbed my phone, and as I was frantically trying to unlock it, I saw the shadow appear in front of the door outside. The guy who was following me had arrived, and he dropped his bike to the ground and started trying to open the door. But then he realized that I'd locked it, and this angered him. "Hey, open the door. Come on, just open it. Come on. It's not like I'm going to do anything to you. I won't do anything. Okay, fine. Just give me your number. I won't contact you, but if you give it to me, I'll go away. Just open the door. Come on, open the door." He was saying stuff like that. I remember because he said he wanted my number, but he wouldn't contact me earlier. Now he was saying open the door. I'm not going to do anything to you. The way he was double-speaking was really creepy to me. It was like his true intentions were slipping out when he was getting frustrated. I wondered what more would happen to me if he got even more frustrated. He started pounding on the door with clenched fists and shaking the handle. The door was shaking in its frame. The door was primarily made of glass, so I wasn't sure how much of a beating it would be able to take. I was absolutely terrified of what was going to happen to me if that man was going to get in. It was time to do something. I couldn't just stand there cowering and waiting for him to get in. I yelled at him. I told him that I was going to call the police and that they would be here any minute. I said, "You better stop, you idiot." He stopped banging on the door and calmly dropped his arms down to his side. He looked at me in the eyes, and I knew that he hated me. I think I'd upset his ego by calling him an idiot. He then pointed at me and said, "I'm going to kill you." Then he turned and kept muttering something, but I couldn't hear it. And then he picked up his bike and left. I couldn't move for about 10 minutes, but I had to when an actual customer came to use the laundromat. I unlocked the door with my trembling hands, and then I called the police. I made sure someone stayed with me on the phone until I got home. I got home safely that night. I hated that night at home though. Because that horrible experience happened on a road I regularly used to get home, it led to a lot of fear and negativity during my commutes to work. It really ruined my life. In order to get back to being myself again, I had to move. I had to get away. I couldn't live each day wondering if I would run into that man again or not. Thankfully, I never did, but it scares me, still to this day, knowing that he could still be somewhere out there. I joined Reddit pretty much to tell this story. I've told the story to my roommates, and I've talked about it a few times with some other people who were there, but that's it. I don't even like to talk about it, because inevitably someone will say, "Really, we should go try and find it again," and I really don't want to. I've looked for it on a map a few times, but I can't find it through Google's aerial maps. Anyway, I'm originally from a major city in southern Ohio, and outside of town there are a number of smaller townships. One of these is known as the more country bumpkin, redneck, grit part of town. It's not even in the same county, but is part of the general area my city is though. In the woods, there's this legend of Hell's Church, supposedly an old church that burned down where Satanists do rituals now, or a Satanist church that burned down by a ritual, depending on who you ask. There are a number of Hell's Church myths in Ohio in many different places, but this one was closest to us, and a number of my guy friends decided they wanted to be ghost hunters and check out haunted places around where we lived. We were juniors in high school, and while all of us obviously thought this was just stupid bullshit, we thought it was funny to go out and scare ourselves. Plus, more people had cars or driver's licenses by now, so we were enjoying a new burst of freedom. I'm a scaredy cat about most stuff like this, but I was the most tomboyish girl in the group, and always kind of wanted to be able to hang out with the guys. Plus, some of the girls in the group were going, so I didn't want to look like a loser. So one day in November, we decided we're going to go out one night and try to find this church. We'd actually been to this location once before that fall, but one of my friends had a curfew. So after exploring an old barn and the railroad tracks on a bridge nearby, we left. We hadn't found the church, to our disappointment and my mild relief. We took cars out there, going past more popular parts of our city and back to this woodsy area. I can't honestly tell you how we got out there, but I know it's off of a state highway, then an abandoned access road past some old warehouse, and then down a dirt road. Once you get down the dirt road, there's kind of a thicker part of the road early on where we parked our cars off the shoulder. We did this because the road thins out and becomes impossible to drive down. And also, someone clearly owns this land, and later down the road there's some no trespassing signage. I'm sure a ton of kids come back here, so it didn't seem odd to me that they wanted to block this place off. I barely thought twice about it at the time. We get out of our cars and start walking down the dirt road, wandering off the path from time to time to check out barns or clearings where we thought the chimney might be. At first, it was just scary because it was dark and old or whatever, but then the barns started to get weirder, like they were filled with weird spray painting symbols and bullshit. But that's not what bothered us, but also other stuff like dead owls that looked like they'd been opened up, and other bits that looked like they might have come from animals. I was grossed out, but we all kind of agreed that these probably came from the same teenagers trying to fake a satanic ritual, or that the animals got trapped in the falling apart barn and died in there. My friends are now hardcore trying to find this stupid chimney, so they keep taking off through the trees into the clearings. Myself and the other two girls who were there kind of hang back on the tree line for most of them, getting a little more nervous and a little irritated with all the coming up empty. As we keep going, we find a bike on the tree line, like a bike that maybe a 12-year-old would ride. That's a little creepy, but fine, whatever. It probably belonged to someone who owned the land. We decide we're going to go a little further, and soon enough, we find another bike. This one is older, a little rusted, but still undersized. We didn't talk too much about the other bike, just kind of mumbling that it's probably still nothing. One or two of the four guys who were there are kind of trying to turn it up, saying, "These kids probably got murdered," or stuff like that, but no one is really having it. By this point, we've been here for about 2 hours, and it's getting really late. Plus, I think we were all a little more creeped out than we wanted to admit. We decide to head back to the cars, and I'm feeling relieved, happy to be headed back to my house and the fuck out of here. But things never work out that way, do they? By the cars, we see a road that goes straight up a hill through the trees. At the start of it, there's a big metal gate that had a "Road Closed" sign on it, which we had seen before, but for some reason it never occurred to us to try and go up the road. We had a small debate at the gate, about an evenish split on who wanted to venture up and who didn't. I absolutely didn't, but eventually we decide we'll go up, just to see. Both of the drivers wanted to go, so there's not a lot we can do about it. We climb over the gate and start up the hill, where an old pavement road is cracked and crumbled under our feet, though it was for sure a real asphalt road at some point. In addition to the road condition and the brush being an obstacle, someone had felled a bunch of trees over the path, purposely blocking off the road from any cars. Some of us are starting to seriously question if we should be doing this, arguing that someone obviously wanted to keep us out of here, but we get teased for being afraid and keep going. I couldn't see where the road would end because it was so dark, and the tree made it hard to see. Plus the road was really steep, so all you could see was up, with a little moonlight peeking through the trees. All of a sudden, though, we reach the end. The trees just open up, and we've come off of the incline to a flat field, and holy fuck, what a sight it was. It's the flat field with tall prairie grass on either side. The path we are on splits the large clearing we're in down the center and leads through the grass to a cul-de-sac with 3 buildings. 2 look like farmhouses with 1 barnish building. They were wood, and while they may have been painted at one point, it looked like they've been mostly weathered and stripped by time. I see this, and I am done. I want to leave. But of course, some of my friends say that we have to check out these buildings. At this point, I finally put my foot down, as do the other 2 girls and one of our guy friends, who decided this is enough for him. So the 3 guys who want to go into the building tell us just to wait there, and while we don't want to be in this field out in the open, we decide we can't just leave them. At this point, we've turned off our flashlights because the moonlight is so strong. The 3 of them take off down the little path, and the 4 of us who remain stand together, bitching about how stupid our friends are and making small talk. None of us say it, but we were all looking to the grass every now and again, worried something's going to jump out. It's just so creepy, this abandoned little settlement. It feels like our friends are gone forever. We see them get into a building and go inside. We can see the flicker of their flashlights in the windows, and I just remember feeling so tense. It was like watching a horror movie in real life. After maybe 10 minutes, we see our guy friends coming towards us, lightly jogging, looking afraid for the first time all night. "You idiots went inside," I said, pissed off at them. One of my friends just looks at us, and I'll never forget it. "It was full of bikes, just bikes chained to the walls," he said. We didn't believe them. We kept waiting for them to say they were kidding, but they insisted, said it was like they were just storing a bunch of bikes there, most of them smaller. They looked afraid, and as much as I didn't want to believe them, I did. They aren't the type of guys to pull a prank for this long. By then we can all agree we need to get the fuck out of there, and we start down the hill, hurrying the best we can. All of a sudden, about halfway down the field, we can see a car's headlights down the hill, about where our cars are. We see them pass slowly, and we know someone is down there looking for us. Because it's so far off the beaten path, we figure it's one of 2 things. Number 1, the cops, and we're going to be fucked for trespassing. Or number 2, the people who own this land, or these houses, or something, and they're going to A, call the cops, or B, murder us. We know that this road isn't that long, so they'll be turning around, circling back soon enough. And because our cars are there, they'll probably wait for us. We're all whispering about this as we pick up the pace, speeding down the hill as fast as we can. I'm not a good runner, but I was hauling ass, getting down there as fast as I could, basically hurdling over the fallen trees. Once we get down the hill, we don't see any lights, but we know they can't be far away. "Get in the fucking cars," one of our friends yells, and we're fumbling with the doors like a horror movie, just too nervous to get into the cars. We get in, and just as we start the cars up, we see the headlights speeding down the road, a giant black truck roaring up behind us. The truck seemed larger than life, raising up off the ground. The whole thing was terrifying, but it was extra terrifying because we couldn't see who was driving in the dark, and with the headlights blinding us. We peel out of there, total pedal to the metal. This truck is still following us, bearing down on us as our two cars race out of there. The car is also getting real close to us, threateningly close, almost like it was trying to run us off of the road. We're all screaming, looking back at the truck, fighting for some distance. Once we get to the highway, we're switching lanes, trying to escape. Luckily we were in sedans, so it was much easier for us to weave in and out of cars. But this truck is still chasing us. We're in two different lanes, but we don't want to get too separated from our friends. The passengers of both cars are texting back and forth, trying to make a plan. It took us about 15 minutes to loose the truck. I'm not sure if the distance was too much, or if they turned around, but once we got to a big shopping center area, we ducked off the road and into a Sonic parking lot. We all sat in our cars for a bit, watching to make sure we weren't going to get snuck up on, before getting out of the car and ordering some food and talking. Everyone was pretty shaken up. It took us a while to settle down enough to head home. As much as we talked it over, we just couldn't figure out what had happened. Eventually, we all went home during what was a pretty silent car ride, exhaustion and lingering fear taking over. We didn't talk about it again for a long time, and we never called the police, which, honestly, as an adult now, I feel like we should have. I don't think about it often, only during the fall really. But when I do think about it, I ask myself, who chased us? Why was that town abandoned? Who owned those bikes? And where are they now? For context, I'm a 20-year-old female, and at the time of these events, I was around 12 to 13. So I grew up in a very rural area. Like, my home was so small, it was legally considered a village. My house was one of 4 on a span of 40 acres. My childhood home, my grandparents' house right up the street, and 2 neighbors. One of my neighbors, called T, had been living across near my family for as long as I can remember, and he rented out a trailer he owned, which was inhabited by the 4th neighbor. His name was Jay. Jay and his girlfriend, Alice, had moved in a few months before these events, and I hadn't really met them. I knew of them, but hadn't interacted with them directly. The day I met Jay and Alice was extremely awkward, as I was a kid and didn't really want to talk to them, but my grandmother had made me go with her to drop off some vegetables she'd grown in her garden. When they came out after my grandmother had knocked on the trailer door, I was first struck by how they looked. I know that sounds bad, but I'm not judging. I now know both of them were addicted to meth. My grandmother started the conversation, and I tried to be polite, as I was raised to be, by introducing myself when told to do so. I wasn't really able to finish my sentence, as I noticed Jay was staring at me very intently. He looked like he was either mad or hungry, or both. Not the creepiest off the bat, as they both seemed polite enough, and I brushed off the stare as just him trying to be polite, looking at me as I spoke to him, as most people do. The creepy part is that as time went on, he began to try and be near me more and more. He'd ride his bike past our house over and over for what seemed like hours, while me and my brother played catch in the yard. Then he began to go to church with me, my brother, and my grandparents. He'd make sure to sit right next to me in the back seat of the car as he rode with us. If my brother tried to sit in the middle so I wasn't right next to Jay, he'd throw a fit about how my brother was squishing him against the door. Then he began coming to my grandmother's house when she'd have me and my brother after school, offering to tutor me with various subjects. What really scared me was that I had begun to see him walking near our house at night, trying to shine a flashlight into my window. He tried various things to get close to me, tried to convince my parents to let him teach me how to golf, tried to help me practice my catching positions for softball. tried to get me to go with him and Alice to the movies, and none of these things ever included my brother. Only me. Things finally came to a head when I was playing with my dog outside in our front yard, and he started repeatedly doing laps on his bike down the road again, staring at me like he did the day we met. I was extremely uncomfortable. I've always had very good intuition about people, and something was always just off with him. But that day, I was terrified. He parked his bike right in the middle of the road and got off. He started walking towards me at almost a jog, and I kept backing away. What happened next is why I believe that dogs are a better judge of character than people could ever hope to be. My boxer ran up to him and launched herself onto him when he was about 6 feet from me. She tore into his arm, and I saw blood. I screamed, and my mom ran out shortly after. She was trying to pull my dog off of him, but as soon as she was able to, holding onto the dog's collar, she started yelling at him, asking him why he was in our yard with me alone. He couldn't answer and just started running back to his bike, riding back to the trailer. My grandmother ended up driving him to the hospital as Jay and Alice didn't have a car, and I later learned he got 16 stitches. He never gave a reason as to why he was approaching me, and they moved out shortly after. I haven't seen him since, and I'm still terrified to this day to run into him again. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. I want to give a special mention to Jay Nightmares for sourcing and translating some of these stories from Japanese. Check out his channel for more stories you haven't heard before. I'll put the link to his channel in the description. If you have a scary story you would like me to read in an upcoming video, this is one way to help me guarantee variety in the stories I share. You can email me or post it to my subreddit. I'll drop the details in the video description. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my patrons and channel members who now have early access to ad-free videos as well as other behind-the-scenes content. Thank you to Jessica Copperfield, Zoe D, Danielle Scholl, Jane Wiggins, Tara Harris, Mary Wright, Kelly Townsend, M, Deshaun Edmondson, Kimmy Love, Wendy Maris, Confessions of a Cleaner, Megan Abrams, Miss Tycoon, Stephen Sloan, Christina Myway, Ashley Bray, Madisa Felter, Danielle, Tina Marie Heckman, Amal Garner, Lisa Radford, Deborah Malaise, Connie Sue, Taya Adwell, Diana Johnston, Vampy Debs, Jasmine Davis, Erica Asir, Fox Mulder, Ram Beltran, Tina, Nick Bigdowski, Sarah C.H., Neil Kavanaugh, Tiara Sanders, Timothy Stratton, Jennifer Jenkins, Lloyd Rash, Maribel DeLuna, Michael O'Malley, Marissa, Kuro, Amber Hobbs, King Slim, Justin Beast Gillespie, Joy Dana, Jay Bardle, Anissa, Stephanie McLaren, Lumini Cami, Skin Crawler, Adiara, Bella Plays 2006, Michelle Welchman, Dana B, Lisa McDonald, Clarice Scott, Madison C, Wasp Sting, Jennifer J, Ashley, Lilypad, Lee, Taya, Wyatt, Gina, Laura, JK06, Fenrizio, Donna, Joey, Big GSC, Tanya, Spaghetti Yolo King, Matthew, October Gypsy, Lisa, Ali, Thomas, Build With Me, Letitia, Fran, Debs, Insomnicats, Stephanie, Summer, Rebecca, Tyara, This Bad Kitty, Your Pappy's Dilly, Lainey, Tripping Balls Through History, Samantha, Erica, Alyssa, Tracy, Killian's Place, April, James Arterburn, Jen, Joy, Handout, Pegasus Genesis, Karen Keating, V. Berry, LJ, Fiona X Fox, Scott, I Like Booty, Monica Level Ace, Chris and Donna, Holly Spry, Kimber, Jasmine, Sanatix, Heather Haven, Kitty Cat Luna 2, ADHD Aurora, Janice, Cinderella Baby, Borderline Betty, Lady Draco, Erica Nicole, Snowball Rathina, Melanie, The Honeybee 987,